A woman in Perth, a vegan, has taken her neighbours through the court system all the way to the Supreme Court because she says they've been barbecuing meat in their backyard and allowing the smell to drift over to her side of the fence. Well, that may be a bit hard to swallow, but many of us are beginning to wonder if maybe we should change our eating habits. Less animal products and more plant-based foods. That's our topic today.
This is Signs of the Times Radio with Kent Kingston.
Well, it's great to have you with us on Signs of the Times Radio today. Pleased to meet you. But yeah, that was on purpose because we are talking a bit about meat today and veganism. We have in the studio today Mariana Venturi, my colleague here at Adventist Media, who's been on a little bit of a journey lately with her diet. How are you, Mariana?
I'm well, thank you, Kent. Thank you for having me here.
That's all right. It's great to have you here. And look, I know that there are those of us out there, listening who are just like me, who as soon as they hear someone who has an accent that is other than Australian, immediately say, oh, where is this woman from? So, Mariana, do you mind just telling us, just to get this out of the way up front?
I am Brazilian.
Okay.
Yeah, straight from South America.
Mm-hmm. There you go. And they speak Portuguese.
We speak Portuguese.
That's right.
So not Spanish.
Not Spanish. Portuguese.
We do understand Spanish as well,
Yep.
but yes.
So you say in your article that for several years you've been thinking about becoming vegetarian or even vegan, which means no meat, no dairy, no eggs. I mean, if you're really going to get specific, no honey, like nothing that comes from an animal source. So given that upbringing, what was the attraction?
So in 2002, I went to England to study like a summer English course. And I went to Newbold College, which is the Adventist college there. And there were my first contact with a vegetarian diet. And I was there for a month eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner without meat.
Right. So the university college there is run by the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
Yes.
So the cafeteria there was serving vegetarian food every meal, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That would have been a bit of a challenge.
That was my first contact with, let's say, vegetarian milk. I never heard about rice milk or almond milk because I'm from a small town in the countryside of Brazil. We wouldn't have access to those things. We wouldn't have those options. And so then I got in touch with an alternative style of dieting where you can be vegetarian and you still can have milk, you still can have a nice and delicious variety of food. And what was interesting, it was by the end of that month, I felt way better.
Really?
And even to
in what
study.
way? Can you define
let's
better?
say, for instance, when we have lunch and when meat is the main article of your meal, especially, in the afternoon you feel a little bit with your energies dragged down, right?
You want to have a little sleep after lunch.
Yes, definitely. Well, I was ready for classes in the afternoon, feeling still quite
alert
and much easier to concentrate as well on classes.
Wow.
And I still had a lot of energy to go and do lots of things. And usually back in Brazil, I would have to snack a lot between meals. There, I didn't have much access to snacks in between, but on the other hand, I didn't need it at all. I would have that nice vegetarian lunch. I wouldn't be hungry until dinner time.
There you go.
And that was new for me as well. I realized that I was getting much more nutrients and the fuel my body needed, that it was enough until the next meal. And still, I had plenty of energy.
Wow.
And I thought, wow,
It is actually a bit of an Adventist thing. I was brought up Adventist, and my parents, had a fairly strong message, no eating between meals. It's been a bit of an Adventist health tradition, not only to be vegetarian, but not to eat between meals and to have a balanced sort of lifestyle. So, but this was your first exposure to that whole way of thinking.
Yes.
Wow, fascinating.
On practical terms, like to taste it in practice, yes.
I mean, when people think about going vegetarian or vegan, they often cite a number of factors, like the environmental reasons, for example, cattle breeding, is one of the largest contributors to, carbon in our atmosphere, all the land clearing that happens in order to, provide grazing ground. And also the crazy thing is that, we're growing a lot of soybeans now, and you think, well, that's good. But the soybeans are being used for animal feed. So again, you lose a lot of energy in that process of growing the soybeans, but then feeding them to cattle and then, and then eating the cattle, you lose a lot.
It's not the most efficient way of
it's not,
getting
not,
fed.
Not hugely, no.
This is something that that's one of the reasons I always wanted to become vegetarian, because we know that back in the days when people had a more natural way of life, more sustainable, things could be different at those times. But today, people are more moved by industry grade. It's all about massive consumption that is way further what you actually need for nutrients. It's just for
the taste. It's
for the taste. So you need, let's say, I wouldn't have a figure now, but imagine 5. You need actually tons more than you would need to feed the consumers. And because of greed, the whole industry of meat has become less and less sensitive to and treating animal life with a little bit more of respect. Especially with chickens and
It's and I think the tide is turning. I mean, people are increasingly choosing free-range eggs, for example, and they want free-range chickens, if they're going to eat chicken.
Yes.
But I think respect is really, important. I mean, maybe it's my romantic idea, but I'm much more taken by the idea of the sort of Native American who, traditionally, centuries ago, shoots the deer with a bow and arrow and then basically thanks the animal for giving its life so that they can eat. I see the respect that's there and the recognition that this is a big deal. But an abattoir, which arguably is actually killing the animal more humanely, than with a bow and arrow, you're right, there doesn't seem to be that same respect there because it's so industrialized. Yeah. Yes. That's a massive issue.
And by the way, even in my hometown back in Brazil, in the near the countryside, my mother has a friend who actually, in her mid-40s, started the business with chickens. She actually stopped eating chicken at all.
Wow.
After
I've
starting
actually
the
heard
business.
that. I've heard that people who work in abattoirs or have worked in as a chicken catcher or something say, "Nah, wouldn't eat it."
Yes.
Or meat inspectors.
And this interesting is because, of course, as part of her business, she's meeting all the standards, the industry standards, everything you have to have in the place and sanitizing all.
It's got to be
everything.
sanitary. There's got to be humane treatment of the animals.
Yes.
Yeah.
And yet, even meeting all those criteria, she firmly decided and shared with my mother that she can't eat chicken anymore.
Wow.
So there's something there for us to reflect.
Well, what about health? Because I mean, you said that when you ate vegetarian for a few weeks there, you felt better. But have you looked more carefully into that? And you reviewed this book for us that is entitled "The Healthiest People on Earth" by John Howard Weeks, and you say this is the book that changed your diet the most. Did this go into health issues much?
This is not like a book written by an expert on health or like a scientist.
He's
or
a journalist, isn't he?
He's a journalist. So he's not writing from purely scientific or medical approach. When he shares about health, he shares from the perspective of his own experience from a personal level. But also, yes, he brings a little bit of research in and here and there.
Okay.
But
So from your understanding, when you consider your health and you consider your move into eating more vegan or vegetarian or plant-based, I think we'll talk about that. That's the word you prefer. What are the key sort of health aspects of switching your diet that sort of grab you?
I would say the first is a vegetarian diet reduces the inflammation. And when I say inflammation, it's not that big, very apparent inflammation when you're sick, when you have an infection or something.
Yeah, not talking about fever or swollen joints or anything like that.
This is something that science has just figured out more deeply recently. Most of the chronic diseases, they are ignited by an inflammation pretty much on molecular level, an inflammation that is very subtle, that you not even realize is there.
Wow.
but your body is constantly fighting against.
Okay, and inflammation is connected with the idea of oxidization, I
Exactly.
believe.
Yes,
and then we hear
exactly.
about antioxidants, like certain foods
Exactly,
have
yes.
antioxidants. Right. So animal foods, whether it's meat, whether it's milk or eggs,
Mhm.
there's evidence that they actually increase inflammation, whereas plant-based foods reduce. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's
Right.
exactly. It's the same similar concept of alkaline foods that helps to cleanse and to maintain your body in the best shape and state, and while acidic foods helps to increase acidity that helps bring more. Makes a environment much more susceptible for diseases to come in.
I have to admit, I'm a lot more dubious about that whole acid alkaline thing because
Okay.
I know every cell in your body can only exist within a very, very narrow pH level.
Very fine tuned, by the way.
Very, very fine tuned. Absolutely. It's incredibly designed, our bodies are. So I do wonder about the whole
But that's the
acidity,
balance that is the
alkaline
key.
thing.
Yes,
But yeah.
the balance. When you eat, just like the oxidation and increasing the acidity levels, it means that you're getting your body out of balance and much more in one extreme. So if you don't eat many vegetables or fruit and you eat much more of foods that will oxidate.
Which is not just animal foods, but also a lot of processed foods,
Exactly,
isn't it?
especially additives, preservatives,
added salt, added
artificial
sugar,
colorings. Yes.
yeah, colorings,
Yes.
all that
Those
stuff.
are dangerous.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that causes even some damages in molecular level.
So it's really more than just a plant-based diet you're looking at. It's really a whole food diet too, isn't it?
Exactly.
Where you really need to head, yeah. Now, one thing that I know John Howard Weeks did mention in his book, because it relates to his personal background, he's from Loma Linda in California, which is one of the world's few, I think there's only 4, 5 or 6 blue zones, longevity blue zones, which another journalist, Dan Buettner, wrote a book about several years ago. It was on the front cover of National Geographic. It was a big deal there for a while. So John Howard Weeks comes from Loma Linda. So blue zones, what does that mean? What's so good about a blue zone? What are the results and what causes it?
So they've studied the blue zones as the places on Earth where there is the higher
proportion or percent?
proportion, longevity, wellness, health, and
when you say longevity, I believe a lot of these blue zones have a much higher than average number of centenarians. So people who've lived for 100, had their 100th birthday and are sort of still going.
exactly.
Yeah.
And,
Okay. So apart from Loma Linda in California, where are some of the others?
Okinawa in
Japan? Okay, we actually have another article in Science Magazine that covers that. It's called Harahachibu, which talks about the belief that you should just eat 80 until you're 80% full, and this is one of their secrets to a long and healthy life. Okay, so Loma Linda, California, Okinawa, Japan. Any others?
Also Italy.
Was Sardinia? isn't it?
Sardinia.
Sardinia in Italy.
Thing, yes.
Yeah. Those are the only 3 I can ever remember. but there are a few more around, aren't they? Anyway, 3's enough. We get the idea. There's a cluster of places where people are living longer and healthier lives. Are they vegetarian in these places, though?
Yes, mostly a plant-based diet. They do have in some places, for instance, in Italy, they do have sheep,
so they do have
animals,
some meat or some fish in Okinawa, I
also
imagine.
fish, but that is not in the same proportion as on the other places.
Right.
It's less, sometimes even for special occasions. But on a daily basis, they have an abundance of fresh veggies, whole grains.
And
Usually
also have
sometimes
an
olive
active-
oil or algae for the Japanese.
Yes.
Some gifts from nature that help them.
Sure. And they also have a very active lifestyle, don't they? They build
Exactly.
physical activity into their everyday.
Exactly.
These are often fishing or farming sort of communities, and also that
And
social
there's a good
connection.
sense of community. Yes.
Yeah, community.
Yes.
And I guess Loma Linda, which is you wouldn't think a town in California would sort of fit this, but yes,
That's the contrast. While the United States has one of the highest rates of chronic diseases, of obesity and strokes and
and I guess
cardiovascular diseases.
Yeah.
That blue zone particularly is where those diseases are almost they are very irrelevant among the population there, because the population lives a healthy lifestyle. And also, back when that article was published in National Geographic, I remembered, I think it was Maggie. Maggie was one of the people they interviewed in Loma Linda, that she was more than 100 years old, and she was just renewing her license. She was driving everywhere. She was going to the gym, and she was...
So again, an active lifestyle.
Active, and her mind was incredibly sharp after 100 years old.
Wow.
So.
And of course, Loma Linda is a bit of a Seventh-day Adventist enclave, again, like Newbold College in the UK that you mentioned, but a much bigger community there. There's a university there, there's a hospital there, a lot of Adventists.
Especially health institutions based on... Yes.
So a lot of Adventists there are vegetarian, not drinking, not smoking, trying to, like you say, get to the gym, live a physically active lifestyle. And then I guess there's the community of the Adventist church there. So in America, which is like, one of the world's scariest places when it comes to obesity and lifestyle disease, and I believe their life expectancy is actually slowly dropping. In Loma Linda, they're bucking the trend.
And also another interesting thing is, Wicks on the book, he contrasts that Loma Linda, the Blue Zone, is so geographically close to another city, which is the birthplace of junk food.
Oh, wow.
So there were two revolutions starting there decades ago, just as Adventists started a healthy shop with healthy food, a healthy alternative. McDonald's, Taco Bell, and all those other... They come from that similar region? They come from that same region.
Wow.
Just those two towns, they are actually neighbor towns. So it's so interesting that what would have happened instead of the junk food who spread throughout the world and changed the diet even of healthy Japanese and Chinese who are plant-based, now eat much more junk food, McDonald's, fast food.
Not to mention us here in Australia.
Yes. What would have happened if the diet throughout the world was influenced more by Loma Linda example, not by the fast food chain that started kilometers away from them?
Absolutely. So what was the thing about like reading this book, the healthiest people on earth? You said in your article that you'd been interested in being vegetarian or vegan for a long time, but you just couldn't seem to get yourself over the line. You kept being pulled back by all these favorite sort of foods, including, meats and things. So what was it about the book? Did it scare you straight? I mean, what?
No, after actually, Wicks doesn't scare you. Like he takes you to a very personal chat. You feel like you are just joining him in his kitchen or for a walk, as he talks about share his own journey. And he's quite humorous, so it feels very light, not scary at all. But he starts bringing us through all the benefits and all the implications of, let's say, benefits of becoming vegetarian and the implications if you keep having a more carnivorous diet. And one thing that I think struck me most was when he referred to some articles like cheese, which I'm very... It was always one of my favorites.
You and a lot of people are very fond of cheese, yes.
Yeah, I love chocolate, but I had more cravings for cheese than for chocolate.
There you go, wow.
That was how big it was for me. And he referred to cheese secretions, like a product of secretions.
Yep.
And I think,
it's a nasty word to use.
That was the only nasty moment of the book, actually. But when you have that moment that, wait, you're talking about the food that I eat. Come on.
That's right, yeah, because milk obviously is a bodily fluid.
Yes.
It is a secretion, and that's ooh. Yeah.
But after, if you continue, he says, once you stop putting the flesh and blood and secretions of dead or captive animals into your system, you're no longer weighed down, slowed down by that stolen plunder. You're free to live a new life fueled by fresh nutrients not the second-hand stuff. And you'll find yourself invigorated in the most natural and healthiest possible way. And then I stopped thinking, actually, we really don't need those articles in our diet, because the phytonutrients and all the best chemicals to boost our health and nutrition.
Except for vitamin B12.
Except
Mariana.
for vitamin B12.
You've got to be honest
yes,
there.
No, yes. But most of them you find in fresh fruit, veggie,
beans, legumes,
so
nuts.
many grains and nuts. And I was thinking, you have such an abundance and colors and different tastes on what is the primarily source. It makes sense that if you go to the second hand, like there is a kind of, on the chain, there are some loss of nutrients there. And you have to think of having your source from the best few first. And yes, get complement with B12, make sure you get from a source that you get it. But I remembered back when I used to be vegetarian New Bold, how waved down I was before, and how energetic and active and sharp in my mind and concentration.
And you say a similar thing in your article, that when you decided this is it, I'm going to go vegan, you had a similar lift in energy.
Yes.
And I guess my question is, I mean, see, I've done a little bit of that 5-2 diet where you fast for a little while, and I was amazed at when I first did it, how I suddenly feel more aware and alert and amazed. But after a while, that sort of dropped away.
Settle down.
Has that been the case for you, or do you feel generally a better sense of well-being?
Yes, in the beginning, it does that peak. That
spikes a bit,
spikes. After that settles, but it's not so evident as before, like the heat contrast in the beginning. But
and you get used to it.
Yes, you get used to it, but also it's a higher level of energy, definitely, than before. And another interesting thing, unfortunately, I've been sedentary, and that is something that I have to fix quickly.
You and me both, Mariana. we sit around at our desks all day looking at computer screens and then wonder why we feel miserable at the end of the day. Yeah.
Yes, but the interesting thing is that I was accumulating fat where women start accumulating especially after we reach our 30s. And after 4 weeks of a vegan diet, even my husband, we noticed that my body changed the shape in a way like I had done exercise. And I didn't change in terms of going sedentary to doing some more walking. I didn't change anything in the physical activity aspect. It was just the change of my diet that did that. And then I realized, wow, I'm not accumulating fat in that way anymore. I'm also burning that fat without doing physical exercise. So which means that, yes, animal products, they actually give your body a shape that you wouldn't have if you follow a vegan diet.
Wow. So you've come to this decision to be vegan or vegetarian being influenced by the Seventh-day Adventists in particular. Is there a faith aspect to this? And have you, where does that fit? And have you found that going in a more plant-based direction has affected your spirituality in any way?
Yes. I've always believed in a creator. When I see nature around and even the complexity of our own bodies, I see a creator, a designer in that. And getting to know this creator on a daily basis, we know that he's always interested in what is good and better for us. And we know from how the recommended diet from the Bible is more plant-based. That's what in the Eden, that's what God establishes. What is good for humanity.
So right there at the very beginning, when the first people were created, they were there and they were given a plant-based diet, weren't they?
Yes, he said that there would be for eating like an abundance of fruit, of veggies, and especially Daniel in the Bible, that experience when he was taken slave to Babylon. And he said they had all those young men there, and he said they wanted to share the food of the king with him, but he had his own lifestyle principles aligned also with believing in a creator, what the creator said that would be best for him. He said, just for 10 days, please give us water and vegetables. And then after 10 days, you see the others, you see us, and
Make the comparison.
And actually, after 10 days, they allowed him to have his vegetarian diet because they saw that they were not even physically better, but also in a better state of mind and everything else.
And it's interesting, because that, I think even amongst like other evangelical Christian groups, in recent years, there's been this push to the Daniel diet, looking at this exact same story in the book of Daniel there, and saying, hey, if this was good enough to Daniel, maybe it's good enough for us. Yeah.
Yes. And also, and everything is so connected in our body. Like if your body is sick, your mind is not so well as well. And if your mind is sick, your body will be sick as well. And that is the spiritual component is affected as well. So if you have a healthy, thriving health on body, mind, and spirit, your connection with God is like your mind is sharper to discern things, and I feel my spiritual life boosted when I actually aligned with the creator who knows who we are in a molecular level and what you need.
Yeah, wow.
Tells me, follow this and that's the best for you. And when I do it, yes, it turns out is actually the best for me.
Well, there you go. So so a healthy body, a clearer mind, and a closer connection with your God. That's pretty special. So just as we finish, just one more thing quickly. If there's someone out there listening to this who's thinking, I know what you're talking about, Mariana. I've wanted to go in a more plant-based direction in my diet for a long time, but haven't seemed to quite get there. Have you got any practical tips that you can give them, maybe just for taking those first couple of steps?
Yeah. Oh, well, the first step I would recommend is go for a good smoothie, for instance, in the beginning, especially when you don't plan your meals, when you change your diet.
A smoothie.
What are you going to have as a breakfast?
Not bacon and eggs.
Yes, like go for a smoothie, because I use it to love like eggs in the morning or a piece of cheese with as a protein in the morning. If you prepare a good smoothie, you have there fruits, fresh leaves, a nice, let's say, coconut or almond milk. Usually I have protein pea milk
and
as well.
banana is quite a carbohydrate. That'll stick to your ribs.
A little bit of peanut butter just to add more protein and give more.
Very
like
nice.
You can do colorful. You can do smoothies that change. Like sometimes with blueberries, they have such a beautiful color, and they are tasteful, and they really boost your energy to start the day right.
Okay, so tip number 1, smoothie.
Yes, and they are very practical.
Yep.
Tip number 2, don't stick with labels.
Yeah.
For instance, in the beginning, I was, okay, now I'm a vegan. But as you are in that transitional, yes, you will have some exceptions. Sometimes, like especially when you are at home and your husband still is eating all the things, or you go to friend's place and you don't want to upset them when they didn't know about you. There will be some exceptions, and
so don't beat yourself up about that.
Yes, because sometimes you create a pressure and even a sense of guilt that if you think, well, I'm just journeying towards a plant-based diet, and I'll have less and less of the exceptions, and daily increasing more and more the intake of fruits and veggies, and bringing more colors, natural colors, not artificial coloring.
So it's
bringing more colors
to
our
process,
dish. Yes, it's a process.
Yep.
And look for a plant-based diet. Not to go from one extreme to other, because remember, our body needs a balance.
Yes. So this is a message. Don't go cold tofurkey.
Yes. A balance is important in everything we do in life, and to make it sustainable.
No, that's great. Hey, thanks so much, Mariana. I really appreciate you sharing your story with us and writing the article for us. And for being a part of Signs of the Times Radio this week.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Today's episode was based on an article appearing in this month's Signs of the Times magazine. A subscription is just $26 for 11 issues a year. To find out more, visit signsofthetimes.org.au. Signs of the Times has been published in Australia since 1886 and is proudly produced by Adventist Media.
This is an Adventist Media podcast.